everybody, and welcome back to Flock Talk. Now, it is no secret that I have a lot of animals, and this isn't even half of them. Hi, baby girl. So I've received some messages lately that have been a little bit concerning, so I just felt like it might be necessary to bring up again some of the safety measures that I have in place to make sure that all of the animals in my household are kept safe and healthy. And just to get this out of the way, because I know the last time I introduced everybody, this guy wasn't here. This is Sham. He is a street dog from up north. My wife quite literally scooped him off of the street from a feral colony and threw him into our household. So that's where he came from. He's here now. We've had him for just under a year, and that's his story. There is another video called Meet the Zoo that goes over all the animals in our house and their names and so on and so forth. The number one thing that I do in order to keep my animals safe is scheduling. I have a little board on my fridge that keeps track of all the things that need to be done in a week. All of the necessary basic things that need to be done in a week. So this will have things like the dog's toothbrushing, it will have their nails when they get brushed, it will have, when the cat's litter box gets changed, it happens every single day. It will have making sure that the lizard has eaten, how many worms she ate, etc. It will have how many foraging toys need to be put out for the birds, when the last time a toy rotation was done, so I can keep track of all that stuff and make sure that everyone is getting everything that they need. The next thing I do to keep everyone safe and healthy is cleanliness. So dogs can carry gram-negative bacteria, and reptiles can carry salmonella. So it's important that things are being kept clean so nothing transfers to anybody and makes anybody sick. So how I go about doing that is really basic for the most part. I make sure to wash my hands before and after handling any animal, especially if I'm switching from one species to the next. If I have handled my leopard gecko, I make sure that if they touched my shirt, or if I was handling them and touched my shirt, I will change that article of clothing, just so that way if I then let the birds out and then they're sitting on the shirt, they're not going to get any sort of cross-contamination. Otherwise, it's things like making sure I don't, use the meat fork on the vegetables and basic stuff like that. For extra safety for the birds, I do my best to mop the floors every day to every other day, and the upholstery and blankets and stuff like that get washed really, really regularly, just so that way if a bird were to land on it, they're not getting any sort of cross-contamination with anything that the dogs have walked on or got their fur on and stuff like that. Next on my list is separation. And this is a critically important one. None of my predator to prey animals ever interact with each other. They are never in the same room as each other. They are never, ever capable of coming into contact with one another in any regard. If it is bird time, the dogs are away. If it is dog time, the birds are away. If it is lizard time, there is nobody anywhere close to be able to get any sort of cross-contamination, to be able to accidentally get hurt. And this is where a lot of my concern comes from with some of the messages I've been getting lately. My dogs do not come into contact with my birds. My cat does not touch my birds. Nobody except for a human being touches my birds. And there's a few main reasons for this. Now, I worked as a dog trainer, and I have a very well-trained dog. This guy's new. I've not even had him for a year yet, so I don't have 100% faith in him. But Yoshi I've had for 3 years. She is very, very well-trained. She knows that if she sees a prey animal to immediately offer me focus, she would absolutely not jump at the birds if they were in the same space as her. Now, does that mean I am ever going to have them out in the same space? Absolutely not. Never in 100 years would I ever do that. And there's a few main reasons for this. The first being accidents happen. It doesn't matter how good your dog is. It doesn't matter how sweet they are. Any number of things can happen. Any accident can occur that's going to cause them to get hurt, and it doesn't even have to be of malicious intent. They can just be trying to play, and look at the size of this paw. This paw could crush Mia by accident, right? They could roll over and accidentally land on top of your bird. They could be absolutely the sweetest puppy on the planet and still accidentally do a lot of harm. A lot of dogs have high prey drive, and you're working against a biological innate desire to do something. So even if you have the world's greatest training, there is always the possibility that something will go wrong, that something will trigger them that day that will cause them to move towards a prey animal. There is never a 1000% guarantee that they aren't going to accidentally decide to try and eat them that day, right? It doesn't matter. Accidents happen. You never know. And on that same note, your bird could bite your dog's ear or something and cause them to go and snip at them. And that could also injure your bird quite greatly. That could unalive them, right? Those are things that could happen by accident in the blink of an eye that you can't really stop in most circumstances. On top of that, as I mentioned earlier, cleanliness is super important. Dogs carry gram-negative bacteria in their mouth. They lick their fur. It's all over their fur. It's under their nails. Even if your bird is just sitting on them, or even if you're going like this and then touching your bird, you're moving that bacteria from one dog to the next animal and potentially getting them quite sick. So it doesn't even have to be, something intentional or a major accident that happens. Just being in the same room as them could very well get them quite sick. So what I do in order to keep my animals separated is they have separate rooms and separate spaces whenever it's another animal's designated time. So the birds have their bird room that they stay in whenever it's time for the dogs and cat to be out in the room. When it is time for the birds to come out, Sham, this big boy, and our cat go downstairs into the basement and the door gets closed behind them. And Yoshi, my smaller dog, has a kennel up here. She goes into her kennel and she stays in there until bird time is over. So that way the animals are completely separated from one another and nobody can accidentally cause anybody harm. The next thing we do in order to do our best to keep everybody safe is a lot of training. And while I never have any intention of having my birds out in the same space as my dogs and my cat, it is important for them to be prepared if that were to ever happen. Say somebody doesn't shut the door right one time, or say the door just busts open. I don't know, maybe a tornado comes tearing through, and all of a sudden I've got birds and a dog. That's the least of my concerns if that happens. If something happens and a bird ends up out in this room with the dogs out at the same time and the cat out at the same time, I need to be sure that they are going to be able to respond to cues and they have the training necessary to not cause immediate harm to them. So a lot of the things that I'm going to say Yoshi is trained to do, because Sham is still very, very new, so he is not quite up to snuff with a lot of these behaviors yet, but we have emergency protocols in place. So a lot of the emergency protocols that we have are trained behaviors that plan for as many unpredictable events as I can try and plan for. So the biggest one I have is if a bird comes flying through the room, I want my dog to immediately run to their designated spot and stay there. So how I go about simulating this is I will run around with like a cat wand or something that makes a fluttering noise, and I will run around as panicked as I would be if my birds were to actually get out of the room. And what that does is it trains my dogs where that becomes the cue now. So if I come running through here going, oh my god, 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 they both know to run to their spots and stay there. So Yoshi runs straight to her kennel, and this guy will eventually learn to go to the stairwell and stay there until I have resolved the situation and released them from their spots. Additionally, we work a lot on prey drive stuff when we're out on walks. We will use wild birds, we will use squirrels, we will use any small little creature that they are desiring to chase, and we teach them alternative behaviors. So instead of, you see the squirrel, I want to go chase it, and I think that's fun, what we do is we teach them to offer eye contact instead. So if they see a bird fly right in front of their faces, their immediate response is to turn and look at me instead of chasing that animal. And that way, when it comes to here in the house, if plan A fails and they don't happen to run to their spots, their next best bet is to stop what they are doing and find me and look at me. That way their attention is off of that prey animal, that is off of my bird that is flying around the house, and their attention is on me. I can easily grab them, put them in a safe spot, and then corral the birds and get them where they need to go. On top of this, what we did was work on general neutrality around each other. So this guy, again, he's too new to have learned this yet, but this is something we did with her. Once they are solid around wild birds and wild squirrels and all that stuff, what I do is I will have dog A in a kennel and I will have a bird in a carrier. So they are still completely separated, unable to get to each other. And I will treat them for just acknowledging their existence and moving on. On the bird side of training, it was a lot of desensitization. So the biggest thing with birds is that they're prey animals and they will panic when they get scared. So with that, a very critical thing for them is making sure that if they see a dog, they will not be scared. I want them to be confident, I want them to be comfortable, so that way they will be able to respond to cues and not freak out, maybe hit a window, or potentially end up somewhere where they could get hurt. So how we did that was the same process, having the bird in a carrier, having the dog in a kennel, and having them just be able to see each other from a safe distance and be able to treat them for looking at each other, seeing the dog kind of shuffle about in the kennel, get desensitized to all those weird sounds. So if something goes wrong, they are not scared of the dog existing in the environment. Other than that, when it comes to the birds, the biggest thing that they have learned is recall. So if they get out, I can call their names and they can immediately come back to me and go into the room. I really think that's it when it comes to the main things that I do to keep everyone safe. I really just wanted to emphasize that my predator and prey animals never interact with each other in any regard. They are always completely separated by barriers and doors and carriers and whatnot. So there is never a chance that they can accidentally come into contact with one another. Nor do I recommend that anybody allow their predator and prey animals to interact with one another. It's unnecessarily stressful to your prey animals. It can be very dangerous for your prey animals. And like, would it make my schedule a little bit easier if I did that? Absolutely. Could I trust my dogs to not go after my birds? Absolutely. Am I going to? No, absolutely not. It's not a risk worth taking. It doesn't benefit any of my animals to do that. So it is not something I will ever recommend or ever partake in. So that is kind of it on the basics of how I keep my animals safe. I hope this answered some of the questions you guys have, and if you were considering owning, predator and prey animals in your household, I hope this gave you kind of some things to consider on just how much work that can really be to manage this household. But that will do it for today, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!